So first of all, all right, so hello, my name is Ananda Rankin. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a representative from the Black and Micro Programming Committee, as well as a first year grad student at Washington University in St. Louis in the molecular microbiology and microbial pathogenesis PhD program. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to all the people involved. Black in Microbiology would like to thank all of our sponsors for helping us make this event possible. We would like to say a special thank you to all of our gold level sponsors, the American Society for Microbiology, the American Society for Virology, and Quiagen. Their generous support is instrumental to the success of Black in microbiology this week and beyond. And we appreciate their continued efforts in supporting and recognizing Black microbiologists and their contributions to science. So this is our fourth panel in Black in Micro Week. And this is a place that is created by microbiologists for microbiologists. And this is a safe space, so everything that we have here please, you can talk about later on, but try to leave some identifiers out. And so I want to, with that, get started in introducing our panel. So we have our Dr. Pascal Guiton, who is an assistant professor at California State University, East Bay. We also have Dr. Regina Joyce Cordy, an assistant professor at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, as well as Kaylee Arnold, a doctoral student at the University of Georgia. And with that, I will let the panels introduce themselves with a little more detail on who they are, what they do, what they work on, and perhaps what has gotten them interested in this topic. And I'll just kind of go from how I have it on my screen. So our first panelist will be Dr. Pascal Guiton.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ananda, for the introduction. And thank you, all of you who put Black in Micro together. It's a privilege, actually, to be able to speak about microbiology and science as a Black woman to a broad audience. So I am an assistant professor at California State University. I went to Georgia State University as an international student for my bachelor. And I was told to say I graduated summa cum laude, top of the entire university that year. So, okay, I'm putting it out there. And I went to Washington University in St. Louis, Ananda, in the same department for my PhD. And I studied urinary tract infection. So I was a bacteriologist. So it was hashtag Black in bacteriology. And then I decided to get into eukaryotic pathogen because I really wanted to understand more about eukaryotic microbes and more about the host pathogen interaction. And so my lab studies, so I did my postdoc at Stanford with Dr. John Bufroyd on Toxoplasma gondii, which is behind me. And my lab currently studies the interaction of Toxoplasma with intestinal epithelial cells, but very early in infection. And I work with mainly undergraduates and some master's students. And so, yeah, started the lab years ago, very new. So thank you. Regina, you want to go?
All right. Yeah, thank you. So I also want to thank the organizers for having us here. I'm also very excited to take part in this panel today. So yeah, I'll say a little bit about, I guess, my background. So I'm assistant professor at Wake Forest, and I started my lab 2 years ago, and I'm working on Plasmodium. So I study malaria, and I'm really interested in understanding how some of the variation between different hosts can maybe explain some of the differences in disease outcomes. So specifically, I'm interested in how factors such as the metabolites that are present in the bloodstream or even microbes of the gut might have some impact more broadly on sort of the whole system during disease. And my interest in microbiology started I would say pretty early on. I guess in undergrad, I started to take classes, and I just loved it. I thought it was just so fascinating. This idea of these tiny little, organisms that live in our bodies, and I kind of just like the ecology of it and thinking about it like these little organisms that use our body as their world, and just kind of whether they're wreaking havoc on it or helping us, such as the commensal microbes. I just thought the whole thing was fascinating, that there's just all these tiny little microbes living on our body. So with that interest, I took a lot of classes, University of Virginia for undergrad, just in microbiology, virology, basically as many as I could take. And then I also kind of started in the bacteria world. I got into an E. coli lab at the Uniform Services University. I did a summer program. I would say summer programs were like one of the most major, influences for me. And a lot of these were programs that were geared towards minority students. So just to put a plug for that, I mean, those programs really helped me, see myself as a scientist from an early age. So I studied enterohemorrhagic E. coli as one of my first experiences. And I just kind of fell in love with the whole thing. I was like, man, this is crazy. These tiny little microbes causing disease. I just wanted to understand the whole thing, just the microbe to the disease. So yeah, I stayed with that a little bit. I got a little bit interested in tuberculosis, which is kind of what brought me into sort of the global view. And I started thinking about just basically the diseases that impact humans more broadly around the world. I started to just kind of study that. And so I think that kind of helped me to understand and maybe just learn a little bit about malaria. And then once I learned about malaria, the reason I really got kind of hung up on it is because my own family has sickle cell in our family tree. So even myself, I'm a carrier for sickle cell. And so when I had been going through college, and I'd hear along the way these things about sickle cell carrier and malaria, and I'd never really studied it. So once I, kind of got far enough along in my path, and I started to turn toward this and say, I want to learn a lot more about that than just that little factoid. I want to understand, why is it that, people of the African diaspora have these certain traits, and that they were driven by this malaria parasite, and what is this malaria parasite? So that's kind of where I would say I get my focus and energy toward malaria and red blood cells comes, is kind of even just thinking of how it relates actually to even Black Americans based on our own genetics and our own red blood cells.
All right. Also, I'd like to thank everyone in Black and Microbiology Week. It's incredible to see so many Black folks like across the world coming together, and it's just, and I'm sure we can all say that we've very often have been like, maybe the only one, maybe only two in labs and in departments and stuff. So just seeing us all come together has been absolutely incredible. So a little bit about me. So I'm a PhD student at the University of Georgia. A little bit how I got my start. So I got my bachelor's in biology from the University of Redlands. It's a very small liberal arts college, about an hour east of Los Angeles in California. And then I got a master's in ecology and evolutionary biology at Tulane University. And that was actually kind of my introduction to microbiology. I was actually in phytes and bacterial endophytes. So also appropriately, it's also my ecology day. So I enjoyed the panel earlier. And then I've been interested in wildlife diseases for a while. So I'm currently in a disease ecology. I'm currently in a disease ecology program at University of Georgia. So I would actually probably describe myself as a microbial ecologist, more accurately. So I study how the environment influences microbial communities and microbial interactions. And for my PhD work, I work on a disease vector, kissing bugs, which transmits the parasite Trypanosoma cruzi, which causes Chagas disease in humans. So I kind of approach at least my PhD work from the point of view of the vector itself. So I look at the gut microbial communities of the vector, and also I'm interested in understanding how changes to the environment, changes to the habitat has an influence on these gut microbial communities within these vectors, within these insects, and then ultimately ultimately what that means for the insect's ability to pick up a parasite and then transmit it. And then so these parasite, the Trypanosoma cruzi parasite, lives in the guts of these insects, so there's direct interactions to be looked at. But yeah, so I come from kind of like a more wildlife ecology background and have like thus slowly gotten more into parasitology, bacteriology, and yeah, I'm working towards my PhD, and hopefully I can continue similar work later on.
Thank you for sharing some of what you do right now. And so kind of to go a little bit into more of the science in the field of parasitology, what do you think are some of the most interesting questions or current questions to date in the field?
So I was thinking about it a lot, and I think some of the pressing questions, the one that really popped in my head was the relationship between parasitology and emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases and climate change, right? We all know that climate change is real, it is man-made. There's a lot of communities that are already suffering from the negative consequences of climate change that nobody talks about. And those communities tend to be poor communities, and poor communities tend to be Black communities. And so things like deforestation, consequence of that, people get exposed to more microbes that they've never seen before. So yes, we have viruses, but there are also microbes that are parasites that are actually killing wildlife, causing extinction of frogs, for instance, affecting people, right? And we all know that with parasitic infection comes poverty. Poverty fosters parasitic infection, and then the cycle keeps going on and on. And so really what I want for us to think about as parasitologists is how we can use our skills to help protect these communities, right? To help get a better understanding of the dynamic between the rise in parasitic infection, right, and climate change. And that's the first question that I mean, there's a lot more, but this is really what I thought about when you asked that question.
Yeah, I had kind of one sort of related to that as well. I also think there's so many things that we can think about, and I tend to think about it in sort of like being, you know, a sort of in a pure biology sense, and then also in a more medical applied sense. So I think in the medical applied sense, there's always work to be done, you know, in terms of vaccines and treatments. You know, drug resistance is kind of one of those examples where it's sort of like a continuous arms race, trying to make sure that there are, you know, a drug available that, you know, can be used, and that the microbe isn't actually, you know, becoming resistant before we have some other option. So I would say maybe that would be one of the areas that I think continuously will be something to look into, and even just improving drugs. So there's also parasitic diseases that really haven't had as much drug development as others. So some have had continuously more and more studies where drugs have improved, and then others it's kind of stagnated. And so, you know, those could really use some, you know, improvements. That would be sort of on the medical side. I think on the biology side, I really agree with what Pascal was saying in terms of thinking about sort of the One Health idea. So this is something that I think about a lot, and probably even more, even recently, you know, I was looking at some of the news about Naegleria fowleri and the amoeba infections in Texas. And I think, you know, I do feel like there's a lot of work that we can do to think about things like, how do all these factors, not just within the single host, but, you know, the environment, the socioeconomic factors, the climate change, how is that going to affect sort of the parasitic diseases in the US? And especially thinking about it in the context of the history of parasitic diseases in the US, and that far more of these types of infections used to be found, especially in the Southeast US. You know, as climate change is kind of undergoing its process, you know, what does the future look like? So I think this kind of One Health concept, thinking of ecology, climate, all of these things, parasitic, every one of us that studies parasitology knows these life cycles are key, right? Like that's the whole thing. And so when you think about a life cycle, it involves, multiple organisms, multiple environments. And so, I think parasitology is inherently related to kind of like the One Health field. And we do have to kind of be thinking broadly about that, because I think that as, these external factors change, you can't expect that the sort of, areas where the parasites are affecting people will be the same. And we're not always necessarily monitoring, all of the, to the point that Kaylee brought up about wildlife, all the different kind of parasites that are in wildlife, and how much are we even seeing how those epidemiologies are changing? And I think that's kind of an understudied area too.
Yeah, just to echo particularly that last point, I do think putting more research and time into the ecology and understanding how parasite dynamics are changing within wildlife, and then also particularly as I study disease vectors, how they're being affected by, again, climate change, particularly as they're ectotherms, and then also with deforestation, land use change, the world is changing everywhere. And then so how is that affecting the organisms that are responsible for transmitting it to humans? And just, I think just like all those cycles, and again, with the One Health aspect of it, and then how do humans come into play? And, who is kind of taking the brunt of, these changes, who's not, and who's able to move, and thus, so I think it's really important is to especially think about humans and how that fits into the entire cycle of these changing parasite dynamics.
And I want to add on that same question of the outstanding. So there are all those studies about helminth being able to help, right, with asthma and allergies and all of that. But my question is, we're not going to go about giving people worms, right? So we need to actually think about parasites. Yes, by nature, they harm, right? That's a definition. They exploit you and so on. But how can we, with all the tools that we have now, right, actually get at those elements that could help? Like, how can we actually use parasitology the way we've been using bacteria, the way we've been using viruses, right? How can we actually use them to understand us better and to help us solve problems? Because usually, again, when you think, especially in the United States, I'm sorry to say that, but when you think about parasitology, it's always about outside. It's the poor, it's the, and again, who are those poor people? Black people, African people, right? Where I'm from, we don't have winter, right? The type of disease that we have where I'm from is not the same type of disease that they'll have in South Africa, right? And so we really need to think about not just studying the parasite, but really how we can actually exploit them, right? To try to help some of the issues that we have. And I think one of the reasons we do not have this ability, or we do not put the resources there, it's because the stakeholder financially don't give a crap about it. And I'm gonna deviate a little bit, and let's talk about neglected disease of to one of those people who have money to support. When you call a disease neglected disease of poverty, diseases of the poor, diseases or whatever, nobody wants to develop a drug for that because there's no money into it. There's zero money into it. So the question for us parasitologists is, what can we do to actually get resources, right? Resources to support the research that we do, because it matters. There's 1.7 billion people in the world who are suffering from those neglected infectious diseases. There's 20 of them. 13 of them are parasitic infection. And guess what? They affect poor people. They affect people where there's poor water quality, poor sanitation. So when we go and we dump all those drugs and we do all of that, we also have to take into account the environment where those people live in. We have to take into account the culture that those people live in. We have to take into account the fact that the diseases that, the pathogen that we study in our laboratories, they actually kill people on a daily basis. And so my parasitologists out there, when you go and give your presentations, when you like, oh, Plasmodium is such a great model organisms and all of that, please never lose sight of the fact that one child every 2 minutes is dying from malaria. And yeah, you're like, oh yeah, well, this is America, what can we do? Yes, in America, you have non-tropical diseases that are caused by parasites that are afflicting the Black community. Example, trichomoniasis. Black women are affected by this disease. Nobody talks about it. This is a parasite. The question that I have been thinking about since I've been teaching parasitology is, why are they neglected? Who decides that this should be neglected? And what are we doing as parasitologists to fight for our field so that it is no longer neglected? So to me, this is, yes, it is not necessarily scientific, but it defines our field. We've been left of microbiology. We've been put into public health and tropical medicine like it doesn't matter, but it does matter. The reason why parasitology sort of blew up is because colonial people were dying in the colonies because they were suffering from tropical diseases, malaria. They were suffering from sleeping sickness. And then what they did, they used those people, studied it, went back to the Western world, and then they found a solution. They're like, oh, we need more sanitation. Oh, we need more of that. How about the people you left behind? And so as parasitologists, our field is such that we cannot pretend to just be narrow in our thinking where we just think one country. No, it is a global field and we have to start thinking globally. I'm done.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I think you make some great points. And I think that the idea of making sure that all of us are thinking about whatever parasite or parasites we study, thinking about it kind of in that broad context. And, also like you, I started teaching parasitology, in my position, and I've been thinking about this the same way, and actually make a point to really stress how parasitic diseases do affect Americans. And the examples are very striking in terms of them being health disparities. So just as it's outraging to look at the health disparities around COVID, it's quite outraging to look at the health disparities around parasites within the United States, because they're not affecting people in this kind of even way. It is a lot of Black people in specific areas, or just, people in certain areas, but it's not just kind of everywhere. And I do think that, when we think about, sort of funding priorities and things like that, we do probably have to kind of just search within ourselves, and like you said, Pascal, think, hey, why, what can we do to make sure that these diseases are really, getting the same attention? Because I do feel that, I've been happy that I have been able to learn about those, and that there are some researchers that are doing great work on them. But it's like, I'm always so surprised when I think about how few and how little those diseases are getting, the attention. And so I do think that, that's a big issue, and probably just by everyone trying to think more about sort of the social context, I do think that's very important, because, these are people's lives and it does matter. And so I think that, it's really important to, be aware of that.
And I just want to kind of on that note of, there's so many people who say science is apolitical, but both of you are describing exactly like why it is political. Who's getting money, what research is being funded, who's getting helped, who's being neglected, and also just kind of the importance of like diverse spaces and how that will, help foster, it does certainly kind of put the brunt on marginalized folks, but still having diverse voices and diverse spaces will hopefully and should increase the importance and again, like kind of just the political structures of science funding, and that it can go to these neglected diseases, which are neglected for a reason, because science is political.
And you know, one of the reasons why maybe people don't think about parasitology the way we think about it, maybe because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it in our classrooms. We don't talk about it in social environment, especially in the classroom. So I teach undergraduates, right? And I teach parasitology. As a matter of fact, I had to fight to be able to teach parasitology, and this is another, anyway, forget about this. But I teach parasitology, and I was telling the panelists before this that one of the activity I do is a debate where I force students into different groups, and they have to basically address the role of the United States in the fight against parasitic diseases. Like, do you think the United States should invest into these diseases? And the reaction was, Dr. Guiton, I cannot take this position. I cannot agree. So don't put me in the group that agree. I don't think we have to do it. It doesn't affect us. So why would my tax money go blah, 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 blah. Here, Americans have investment in countries that have parasitic diseases, right? If those people don't do well, America doesn't do well because money doesn't come. That's one. Two, parasitic infection affects American. The world is a global thing. So to me, we have to actually talk about it. We have to teach it, right? Because who are the future scientists? Who are the future political leaders in the US? Who are it's our students, right? They're the one we're going to go and advocate for those things. So if in the classroom, we talk about parasitology, like, oh, malaria get transmitted, the sporozoite goes and then it gets through and blah, blah, blah. I get my A and then, okay, that's it. That was, you know, but when you actually make it, you I don't know how to even explain it, right? Like you sell it for what it is. Then you grab people's attentions, right? You bring them there with you. Look, I love my country, okay? And I am an American citizen too, but I'm waiting for Trump to remove my naturalization. So I'm living fear right now, but that's besides the point. I grew up in the Ivory Coast, okay? So diseases like TB, polio, malaria, they're common, right? They're there. We sort of live with it and we are able to deal with it, right? But what I cannot stand is when we are only presented as such to American pupils, where all they know is, oh, Africa, poverty and diseases and whatnot. By doing so, you are affecting our tourism. You're basically keeping us poor. And parasitologists, we know that when people think about what we work on, it's like, ew, parasites, right? It is not appealing. So as much as we want to understand the disease, we want to help people, we can even do more for those poor communities. How many of us go or create podcasts or whatever to actually talk to African people about their findings? You go down there, you fly over there, you take their poop, you take their blood, you do all of that. Who benefits from this? Who benefits from this? Have you ever gone back to explain, hey, what and created a forum where you can actually talk about the benefits of all this science that we've been doing, right? So as parasitologists, again, it falls upon us, especially in a country like the United States, to take that on our shoulder. Science communication is key for the development of parasitology as a field. We need to be out there. We need to stand up for what it is that we're working on. And yeah, so don't be parasites. I'm gonna leave it at that. Do not be parasite, right? Because again, you go you take advantage of people, you may not know it, but you harm people, right? You harm people because you go, you take some sample, you don't ask the person culturally, they may feel vulnerable, but you just do it and then you leave. It's just wrong, you know, and I just think about that, right? Think about it. What is your role as a parasitologist on the global stage? What can you do to actually bring the benefit of our findings to the people who actually need it, to the people who actually will be helped by it, right? One of my favorite example of American is President Jimmy Carter. Like, all he did is just filtering water, and he single-handedly got rid of guinea worm. I mean, it's simple. Anyways.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the thing that you're sharing, it's so real, and it's also something that it's strange in a way almost how little we do talk about that as a field, you know? Like, I think that that's, to me, that's just seems like something that, you know, you see these things are going on, but you know, kind of not talking about them, I think, is what makes it you know, persist. And so I think that you just gave voice to it, you know, and I think that's really like very, very important, because I think that you have to voice it. And even if it's a truth that people don't want to confront, it's really important to hear it, to receive it, and to just say, hey, you know what, that's true, that makes sense. So what can we do as a field to not keep doing that, you know? And I think it's important. Like, we should just be having this conversation more to figure out some solutions, you know? I know I've thought about this a lot too. And one of the things that I guess I've thought about it from a few different perspectives, but thinking about the classroom, you brought up the classroom. So I wanted to kind of bring some examples that I thought about when teaching as well. So I teach two classes, an intro bio class and a parasitology class. And the intro bio class is more geared towards non-majors. And in that class, both classes, I basically had you know, I have the feeling, whether it's people's perception of, you know, Africa is negative, or as Black Americans as negative, I feel that this, or just brown people in general, I feel that this is you know, that people can understand, like, oh, this is a group of people we need to help, but they don't always think about it as like, this is a peer, like, this is a person who's like doing great things. So to me, that's one of the things I try to bring into the classroom a lot. So I do examples. So in parasitology class, I showed these TED Talks I picked African scientists showing like just amazing, awesome science, you know, as the examples, because it's like, first of all, there's a lot of examples you can find. So it's not that this is hard to find, but also I just feel it's like, if you're going to pick an example, and it could be any example, like, you can also use that opportunity as a way to like simultaneously show that there's, you know, really, really strong talent, and here's a really high-tech example of something, you know, coming out of Kenya, and it doesn't, and you're just kind of passively doing that. But as people get more of that type of view, then it helps, because, you know, then they're not going to necessarily, you know, always see it in one light, you know. And in the same way in the other class, like, I think about articles that I can send from, you know, Black authors and things like that, just because it's just important for people to see that it's, like you said, it's not just one channel where, okay, all the minorities, whether in the world or in this country, are in this kind of, you know, sad shape. No, there's people who are, you know, doing great work at your level, and like, they have really important contributions. And, you know, we actually can, as educators, take those chances we get whenever we can, assign a book, assign an article, show a video. To me, that's one of the few ways I felt like I could kind of enact something meaningful in that, to address this type of thing right away. So what I would think in terms of our field is, you know, maybe we can think about, obviously we did some of this at the MPM meeting, but like even at other meetings like the ASTMH and others, it'd be, you know, can we have more panels, more discussions, you know, and just talk about it. Maybe we can't solve it today, but let's like at least, you know, acknowledge it and say, hey, this is this is probably something our field should figure out, you
Or
know?
even bring Black people who do this work, right? Like you go to a conference on parasitology and there's only one Black scientist. Look, there is an African Journal of Parasitology, right? The science may not be like, what do you call it, like 2 photons or whatever, but it's oh, somebody is telling us that it's hard to find us. My question to you is, how hard did you look? Let's just not make excuses anymore. How hard did you look to find us? We are not hidden. We are there. As a matter of fact, we are Black. We stand out like this. And
I actually, I'll kind of take the position of this. I actually feel like we are hidden. So like, I'll just go ahead and disagree because I actually think.
Why are we hidden?
But what I'm saying is, I think these forums, like what this group that did the organized Black and Micro did, is they're bringing us to the surface, And I think that this is why this is so important, because you do have to comb the internet, like. And I agree, just because I feel like I've done it too. So like I've done that too, where I've just like picked an institute and just combed like long, and so I'm just saying I do agree that it is very, very difficult. So, we aren't hidden like literally, but sometimes it can feel that way. It's just because there's so few of us,
To me though, is why is there so few of us in places like, why are we hidden? If there is so few of us, right? You would think that we will be prominent, not necessarily have the best scientists or be the best, but I'm pretty sure among us, we have some hotshot Black scientists in parasitology. So when you go to a parasitology conference and everything you see is not Black, of course, you're not going to see the Black people, and you're going to have to go and look. If we are not invited to give talks, of course, nobody is going to know us, right? So basically what they're saying is that not only do we have to do the work to belong to the space, and we have to publicize ourselves on top of that. I mean, it's just a lot of work, and here's another example. We trained with white people. We trained with non-Black people. Those people could make us sing. Those people can say, hey, you know what? I have trained this Black person. Now they are at Case Western. You should invite them for conferences. You should invite them for whatever. It's too easy. It's too easy to be like, oh, we cannot find you. It's too easy to say there's a very small number of you. If there's a very small number of us, that means we're not going to take a lot of space in your conferences. That means we're not going to take all over we're not going to take all the time. So please, let's actually be proactive about it and not wait for Black people and Black scientists to create #Black in Micro Week that everybody sees us. And, oh, my question is, what are you going to do after this week? What are you going to do after this week? I'm not saying we are all amazing. Look, in parasitology, I just started in parasitology 5 years ago, okay? 5-6 years ago. I don't have a science, Nature paper, nothing. But I train students how to do science. And I can go and talk about the research that my undergrads have been doing. I can go and talk about what it means to teach parasitology at an American institution, right? So yes, there's few of us. Yes, it is difficult to find us, but what are you doing to help people find us, right? When you find us, how many people do you go to and say, hey, there's this Black parasitologist over here. I invited you, look or something. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's not hard, but I'm tired of hearing it is hard. Now I'm giving you a solution. When you find one, spread the word.
Yeah, I think it's like, I do feel like you're right in the sense that nobody should really be able to use it as an excuse in terms of something like hiring or, seminars, so I do think that I agree with you in that point. Like, I do sometimes think, like you can definitely find somebody, you know, like I think that, and I've even been sitting like in an institute and seen something come through like an email chain, like way high up, and it's sort of speaking as if there's no, you know, nobody in the pipeline, like those type of things. Like those do irritate me because I'm like, no, there's a lot of people in the pipeline and that's just not true. And I know them. And so I do know what you mean. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that I feel that we were depending on other people to help us out. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I think the fact that what has really brought all these Black scientists up to the surface recently is actually coming from within our community. It's us. We're doing it with ourselves. And it's beautiful and it's amazing and it's working, you know? And so I guess like, maybe I'm just thinking like, it's not, I don't think people should be able to use it as an excuse, but to be really honest with you, it's been dismal, the progress that has been being made. And then you get just a bunch of students and trainees and junior professors just in their own time, not even, you know, with any structure, can just pull together these kind of events and just achieve the thing that, you know, you've got like universities and institutions that are, you know, working hard to do. I mean, it's amazing that they, you know, they did that, but it does tell us like there's something, you know, that we, in the system, there's something that is not, you know, just naturally pushing it towards that, you know?
I think to me, right, to me is, why is it that we have to do everything? You know, we are the minority, we have the small few, the small one. Why don't we get help from the majority in the field, right? So yes, I am so proud of us to basically come and say, hey guys, we are here. But I am just tired. How long have we done this? And how long are we going to continue to do this? You know, it's, yes, we have to stand up for ourselves, but if every time we stand up for ourselves, there's no follow-up by the majority, we're still gonna remain within our community. We're still going to, you know, swim and try to get out. So really we need real allies because we get tired. I'm not gonna lie to you, I am exhausted. And whenever I fall down, I need to know that I have a colleague, not necessarily a Black one, any colleague who is there and will say, Pascal, I got you, I'll continue this for you. But there's no one, you know? There's, in general, there's no one, and you have to cultivate this relationship. And you're right, Regina, when you're saying that we're doing all this work, and there's no reward for it. There's nothing. The only reward is our own like pride. We're doing it, but institutionally, career-wise, it's not valued. So then when you think about the system, you're like, okay, I'm trying to recruit Black student into parasitology. And then at the same time, I'm thinking that student need to pay rent. That student needs to help this family. Yeah, is parasitology really where I want the student to go? You know what I mean? It's just the reality of it. I mean, Black people have been working for a long time to express ourselves, especially in science, right? Like, what else can we do? When is everybody else going to stand up?
Yeah, I think that everybody else point is huge, you know, and I mean that's to me that's the point that it would, if it's going to change, that's the point when it will change, because I think that we can't change this system on our own by ourselves. So if we want, you know, systematic change in institutions, it absolutely has to be far more buy-in than just the, you know, Black scientists that are part of the institutions. And so, you know, I agree. I mean, I don't have a great answer for when that happens, but I don't think the institutions, you know, are going to change across the USA without, you know, more broad, like you said, allyship.
Yeah, I hope this week and all the other weeks that have been happening on Twitter, we have Black Botanist Week and like Black Birders Week and neurobiology and everything. And I hope this is a call to action to these institutions, to these allies, people who call themselves allies. I hope you like, you know, take action and not just rely on Black folks to keep ourselves like at the forefront, and that you actually stand up and help make structural change. Like, we legitimately cannot do it on ourselves. We need the structural and institutional power. So hopefully we can see some change moving on from here.
And with that, I kind of have a segue into another question about where do you think disparities in STEM education and from all like levels of education kind of play a role into where we see ourselves represented in microbiology and parasitology specifically?
I want to let Kaylee talk about it as a student first, and I kind of want to hear what she thinks that disparity looks like. Because I feel like now I see things from a faculty perspective.
Yeah, sorry, I think I missed the second half of your question. Can you repeat that one more time? I apologize.
Yeah, so my question was, where do you think the role of, or where do you think the educational disparities in particularly minoritized populations kind of plays a role in the fact that we don't see ourselves represented, that we are not supported as much in the fields of microbiology as a whole, or in parasitology in like particular?
I mean, I guess I would say it makes it hard going through the system of if you're not able to find that support, find the mentor, and find someone who like looks like you and can understand you on a different level to be a true mentor, not just an advisor. It definitely can be hard. I guess I think it's I guess like finding I guess kind of with these weeks, and if they're like from a departmental level or institutional level of help bring in different folks to come in and like give seminars. I have met a lot of amazing mentors just via seminars of someone coming into my institution and connected that way. And I think that's very important. And then also, as Regina mentioned, in in undergrad classrooms and even in graduate classrooms, of showing a different scientist doing the work and showing that, even though we tend to be maybe the only few or maybe only one, that there are other folks that do look like us and there are other folks doing work across the world. I think that does give motivation, if you, in terms of, okay, I may be the only one in at this university, but this is a person I connect with. This is a person I can reach out to. This is a person who's doing work that I admire and can, kind of move forward and kind of like take the lead at my institution and then hopefully help pave the way for other folks. Yeah, I don't know. It gets exhausting. I think just kind of what is echoed. It definitely gets exhausting. And I know like myself, I do a lot of K through 12 outreach, and I think that's another aspect that I would say we don't focus enough on. But again, of sort of recontextualizing and showing that scientists aren't just white people. That scientists, and also even beyond that, science is more than just medicine, and helping to bridge those gaps. At a very early age. If you're 5 years old and you think that you can be a microbiologist, no problem, because you see folks. I think that's going to make a big difference as you get older, and could help at least like mental, I think maybe barriers that may exist in terms of just not seeing yourself belong. I didn't realize that Black folks were scientists until I was like in college.
For me, I'm thinking a bit more from an international perspective here. There's definitely what Kaylee says, being the only one all the time. Yeah, that's that. But what program can we give? Not the Western world going to Africa, but actually have African students come, or Latinx students, South American students, come to our laboratories, right? Parasitology laboratory, know how we think about how we approach parasitology, They're gonna maybe tell us how they approach it, and then they can go back, right? Because we don't want to export the smart ones, right? Or the ones who really want to get into it. We want to actually help them. So how do we create this bridge, this true bridge, not helicopter science, right? This true bridge between people who have the tools, right, to study parasitology and to understand those parasites from a molecular perspective, with those who are actually suffering from it, right? Like with those who see it every day and who want to help themselves. Because I think in the Western world, I don't know, there's this, maybe this sense that African people or Black African people are sitting over there and we just wait for people to come and help us. Yeah, people, just wake up. We don't do that. We don't do that. The only reason it is difficult for us is because Westerners are meddling in our affairs in things that have nothing to do with parasitology, okay? So as you meddle over there, also meddle in the things that matter, okay? And so I'm thinking, create this bridge program, and it doesn't take much, right? It could be bring one student from the University of Ghana, bring one student from the University of Kenya, right? To just get that exposure, okay? And somebody in the Q&A asked how synthetic biology and nanotechnology can help in with parasitology. I don't know much about what you guys do, but I think things like biosensors, right? Like, can we develop tools to detect parasites in water? Can we, you know, you can help with the, and again, this is me thinking out loud, that diagnosis, right? Where it doesn't necessarily have to be with taking blood, but something along those lines. And again, this is just me thinking out loud, right? Like, yeah, that, so I'm just thinking that having that connection, and yeah, and public health, right? That we know that the disparity, for instance, and I was telling this, the one of the poorest country in America, Lowndes in Alabama, 72% African American that do not have sanitation. They have problem with sewage, and as a result, they suffer from Necator americanus, hookworm, which was supposedly eradicated, or we dealt with it in America. But as of 2017, you have 34% of that community afflicted by this disease. Why is that, right? So the public health services needs to actually start thinking about parasitic diseases in the United States. So this is one way where we are, there is disparities, right, in STEM education, and because who is going to talk to people about Necator americanus, right? So to me, it's science education. The more you talk about the science, the more you talk about the relevance of this, the more people will be interested, the more people, African American people, will want to study. A lot of Black people in America in particular are interested in sickle cell anemia because they are affected by it, because they know about it. But maybe, just maybe, if we talk to them about trichomoniasis, that we study it in America, that there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered, just maybe we can get a few more Black people in the field of parasitology from America to study a parasitic disease that affects Americans, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that that's the kind of, in terms of like education and how to reach people, I think those are some of the strongest ways to really do it. So if you have, you know, Black students, Black American students who are, and that's something I found it without even trying, Black students that just, you know, approached me and just told me about their own sickle cell history and wanting to work on malaria. It's because it's common among us, like you said. And so it's like, and they're just the same way that I did. They're just kind of, you know, trying to figure it out. And so I think it's like, there's definitely subjects that, you know, because we are teaching about them in a textbook. So that's one of the few that made it into the textbook. That means that it did reach, younger Black people who were wanting to be scientists, and then made them think, oh my God, there's something like that connects to me. Like I want to learn about that. And that got them excited. So I completely agree with what you're saying, is that, like we can be talking a lot more about trichomonas, about, the hookworm in Alabama, about Naegleria fowleri, about, even trypanosomes. Like we should be talking about what's really, here and what's been here. So even talking about the history, of malaria, and like you were even talking about it earlier about how, sort of the, colonial past and how, the malaria was affecting people. And so, there's even history related to slavery, that deals with that in terms of how even, us as African Americans and, our journey, even has to do with, our ability to survive in certain areas. So it's not disconnected, malaria is not disconnected from, our history. And I think that that's just one of those things like no one talks about, so I'm just like researching it out of my own interest. But, I have this goal to kind of like write something on this, because I it's the same reason why you're saying it too. I just want to, because I feel like younger Black scientists connect, like you said, with stories that they can see themselves in. And, we do know that a lot of the examples we use tend to have, a certain kind of person in it, largely white, largely male, and they're excluding a lot of people. And so I think, but to counter that, you have to be so intentional and really, really work hard to show those other examples, but they do exist. And I do think that, students would definitely get interested in something that they know, literally affects their community or literally affects something in their area. And even just in general, when I was telling my students in parasitology about the hookworm, and its, prevalence in Alabama, some of them were just shocked. Like I showed a real case study, and just shocked, like didn't even know that was happening, And so I think, the education it's kind of a dual mission. It's educating our own, community and educating everyone about, what are the parasitic diseases in the US, and also in doing so, trying to like excite some of the, younger minority students in about subjects that, which I do think a lot of minority students naturally do sometimes gravitate towards health disparities and things that affect the community, because, we carry that on our shoulders. We want to be, helping our community. And so I do think that tying it into education, is important for so many reasons. And I think there's a lot of work we can do there, but I think, we are some of the people that, I think are driven to do that work, because we see, how it's taught, and we want to, update that, and we want to do different things with it,
And I want to add one little thing to get back to that history. I think we need to stop sanitizing science altogether, because the more we sanitize it, the less we learn from it, and the more we make the same mistakes. So talking about parasitology, do you guys know that, what is his name? Gottlob Kush something fed worms to Black people to be able to study that. To me, so from there, why don't we do this anymore, right? And then let the student actually think about the ethics of that, right? It does not, because as scientists, we always worry about the content, like, oh, I need to finish this content. But you can finish the content and just not teach anything at the end of the day, right? So it doesn't take that much to mention that this disease affects a lot of Black people more than white people. It doesn't mean that you don't care about your white student. It's just bring the experience of your Black student, your Black colleague, into the scientific conversation. Okay, like Regina mentioned that earlier about the diseases that most of the people study. Parasite disease, malaria. It's what is that other one? Not schistosoma. What's the other one? The one that called Chagas disease and things like that, right? We can still talk about the other kind, right? We can still. I don't know. I get so passionate about it, because I also feel like you know, we like whenever we talk about the non-sanitized version of science, you get students saying, oh my God, I feel so cheated. I've been taking microbiology for so long and all I know is Pasteur, Robert Koch and all of that, right? And they're great, don't get me wrong, like they were great in what they were doing, but doesn't mean that the dark side of science didn't exist. And I think with the climate we're living in right now, right, where there's racism rampant everywhere, I think it is okay to talk about science and race and all these problems. We can no longer, as scientists, pretend that this thing doesn't happen. And I'm gonna come out and say it. Parasitology has been forgotten because it affects Black people and poor people. The mere fact that you are withdrawing money to help Black people because I don't concern you, I say it's a racist act. That's it. You can put me, I think it is racist in nature because it is assuming that the diseases that affect a particular race doesn't matter. Let's focus on the disease that afflicts more the other race because that is more important. Why? Let's ask ourselves that.
Yeah.
Why?
And if we as a society were more comfortable talking about that, you know, through various parasitic diseases or other things, maybe we would even be able to deal with COVID health disparities better, you know, because we're dealing with that right now and people are not, you know, figuring out how we can turn this thing into a better outcome. And I just think that, you know, all along the way that we're educating people, we're, you know, having them think, and, you know, they have to be able to think about this from different angles, because it's not just cells in a dish, it's, you know, people in a society. And yeah, I definitely, I think it's really important to talk about those things. And I think people just don't appreciate that. It's like, it's great to know how the cells work, but like, man, I mean, is it, you know, if you don't have the society, you know, working in certain ways, then all of those problems with society just play out, and, you know, it's you know, it plays out right in front of you in horrific ways. And so, you know, I think that that's tying those things together, you know, is something that I'm definitely interested in. I think, you know, education is an important, you know, path for that, to say, you know, how can we kind of, you know, make sure people are thinking about, in my intro biology class, I like to talk about it in scales of biology. So I talk about it from the view of molecules, cells, organs, tissues, you know, organisms, populations. And then I drew a big, because of course in the biology textbook, it goes up to populations. I drew a box behind it called society. And I was like, we're going to talk about this, because you put all of this stuff on a society, and then all those problems just start playing out. And so we're not talking about that that problem. And in that class, because it's for non-majors and it does have more of a discussion of society, we read Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and we talk about some of these issues. But it's, you can literally look at the same history from two sides. The polio vaccine, for example, you can look at it at the history of how biology normally talks about it, and you can also look at it from the history of, you know, Henrietta Lacks cells, how they were grown at a HBCU, Tuskegee University, how they, you know, there was a whole group of Black scientists working on it in the early days, and how that, you know, kind of merges. So you can literally just take the exact same timeline and just flip it and show the other side of the story. And I think that, you know, a lot of history is not necessarily taught that way, but even in science, we have an opportunity that we can actually tell some of that other side. And, you know, I don't see why that should be so uncommon. You know, I think it's just probably like, for me, I just see it as like, that's who I am. That's what I want to bring to the classroom. Because if I don't do it, who would do it? You know, it's not that many of us. But I feel like I really would like to see more broad changes in our classrooms, because if you're not putting that society box, you know, as a backdrop, I mean, there's just so much. Yeah, there's so much that's affected by it.
And I hate to.
Can I say one more thing? I promise it will be short.
Okay.
Okay. So, you know, I've been talking a lot about international and African people, and, you know, but here's the thing: agriculture, parasites are killing pigs in America. Parasite is affecting you. There's a lot of economic losses that comes from parasitic infection of cattle and pigs and all that. So even if you don't want to go and work on parasites that kill human beings in Africa, think about the American economy and how parasitic diseases affect those. Veterinary medicine. That's all I wanted to say.
I want to thank you all so much for really like taking the time to explain these topics to our viewers, as well as these disparities that exist in the field of parasitology, especially when it comes to the lack of funding, the inability to really show these great scientists that we have that are Black at our talks and seminars, at conferences, and you've really taken the time to just explain that and your experience in the field, and we really appreciate that. And I really just want to, again, say thank you to everybody, the attendees, as well as the Black and Micro team. Tomorrow, we will be having another panel at 6, where we talk about careers in microbiology with Dr. Dominique Carter, Dr. William Booth, Solope Ajiboye, and Taylor Smith. So please tune in then to come hear more about the different types of careers that you can have within microbiology. And again, I want to thank our panelists.
Thanks for having us.
Just to let other people know, so we've gotten a lot of chatter started now. So if you guys want to continue talking, it has been crazy over here. People have been blowing us up saying, can you keep going, actually. So if you have the time, please feel free to stay and talk. If you don't have the time, we definitely understand it. But you just have free reign right now.
Sure.
Also, real quick, I just want to say our closed captioner has left. So for anybody who is using closed captioning, that function right now is not available. But if you want to stay, you can stay.
I'm delaying recording my lectures, so so no.
We totally understand. I mean, if you have to go and do your lectures, we totally understand. You can always chat us up.
Oh, no, I'm okay. I'm just saying I'm delaying it. I'm, procrastinating.
Okay. Yeah, it was just a lot of it's been a lot of chatter, and people were like, oh my goodness, this is what we needed to hear. This is what we've been feeling for a long time. And the fact that someone that looks like us has the boldness to say it on this panel, it has been amazing and inspiring for a lot of us. So I'll hand it back over to you, Ananda. Sorry, I had to make that really quick announcement because like all of us at Black and Micro, we're like, oh my gosh, keep going. It's been really great. It's like a lot of fiery conversation happening on the background. And I can only imagine if we had this as a conference, what would happen. We would be on our feet. We'd be like, yes, it would be great.
The thing is, I'm naturally fire, so I don't even try, and it just like comes out. So I know it's not necessarily the American way, but I've been in America for a long time, and it doesn't seem to be going away. But yeah, I feel like it's important for us to actually face the reality of what our field is and need, right? To me, one of the reasons I went back from, let's say, Stanford, WashU to a state school, diverse like CSU East Bay, is really because I didn't see a lot of people that look like me. In my entire time at WashU and Stanford, I have seen 2 Black faculty, 2 Black scientists come and give talks at seminars. And I remember the second one at Stanford, he came from Emory. And I remember him because he went over time. And I was like, oh, come on, you cannot do this, And it's just like representation matters. And I know that there's a lot of non-Black colleagues out there who don't necessarily know how to. And I was asked that question earlier today when I was leading this workshop. And what I say is, Black students are human. How will you approach somebody who is not Black, but he's struggling in your class? How would you talk to somebody about your passion, about your research? It's the same way that you can talk to a Black student. You know, you can just say, hey, you know, I see you. The reason why I'm in microbiology and I've been taking microbiology and public health, molecular microbiology, infectious disease and all that, it's because of one professor, Dr. Kudravi. He used to speak like this: you need to know the material from the top of your head and there's no reason not to. And I mean, the way he loved microbiology was amazing. And then one day he's like, you seem to be doing well and speaking a lot. Why don't you stop by my office? Let's talk about it. I had never gone to a faculty office for office hours because I was ashamed of I was always self-conscious about my accent. But that moment, knowing that my professor in America saw me of all people, me, from little country, Ivory Coast, Abidjan, and say, stop by my office, I want to talk more about you. Just thinking about it actually bring me tears. It means something to just see us, you know? And when you go to conferences, when you see a Black student by their poster, even if you don't care about what they're talking about, just stop by and say, oh, I'm so glad you're in the field. It means the world to us. I just, at least to me it does. And so
yeah, I agree with you, and I feel that way too. And it's like at conferences sometimes I'm like, you know, counting how many, you know, Black people there are, and at the poster it's the same thing. Yeah, I just want to stop by just to kind of like, you know, just interact with another Black person. And I think it's also something that, like, I know I've kind of, you know, sometimes awkwardly just, you know, gone up to other scientists and introduced myself just for the sake of, you know, wanting to meet other Black scientists. And so, you know, I think that probably, you know, at least I could say on this panel that, you know, I'm always happy to, when people, you know, just kind of come up to me, you know, and do the same, because I think that we're trying to form community, and, you know, that's kind of how it's done. And, you know, we want to support each other too. So it's, you know, it's all in support. And, you know, that is great, I think, when you can just, you know, kind of bump into people and just kind of, you know, form those, you know, connections. Like, it's very important. And then you don't forget about them because it's not that many of us usually, and, you know, you can kind of, you know, stay connected. So I think it matters. That's the kind of thing that can help you even stay in a field, you know. So like, I think for me, at some point I really got deliberate about finding Black mentors, and they weren't at my institution, but I just found them, you know, however I found them, you know. And I think that it really just made a big difference, because I think I just needed to see it. I just needed to know it was there. I needed to get a little bit of that in my life, you know. And so I think it's important, you know, in terms of when people do feel kind of like isolated and all of that stuff. I think this social media movement is huge, because it kind of just helps virtually us bring ourselves closer together. Like, I've been thinking about it, and I'm like, man, I've met more Black scientists in the last month than like I ever have. Like, this is crazy. And it's always just like through Zoom, but, you know, it's working. It's actually, you know, it's working. So, you know, I think like this moment is kind of unique in that it's bringing us together. And, you know, we just have to make sure we figure out how to keep that going, and keep showing, you know, keep making ourselves have that kind of community, because it is so easy to be in your own corner and feel like you're by yourself. And then that's the kind of thing that leads people to want to, you know, drop out. And so, yeah, I'd say it's very important to find, you know, like peer community and mentors that you know, can feel good about.
And I have to say, like, your mentor doesn't have to be Black, right? All of my mentors in science, to be quite honest with you, they were all white. I started with a white Jewish lady. She told me I'm gonna waste my brain in medical school. I was like, what? And then she said she will make me a scientist. and a Jew. And I was like, I don't know about the Jewish part, but I will take the scientist part. And then at WashU, Dr. Hulgren, Dr. Capron, white male, gray hair. Stanford, Dr. Bufroyd. And as a matter of fact, he was the one who looked at my CV and said, you do a lot of teaching for fun. Have you considered X career? You see what I mean? And he still mentors me to this day. And so to my Black folks out there, Black students, it doesn't matter where you get your mentoring from, so long as that person supports you and sees you and wants you to succeed. Just take the mentoring whichever way you can get it. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, does not matter. Just have somebody who help you affirm who you are within at least the field of science and parasitology.
Okay, so we might actually be wrapping up a little soon. So Kaylee, is there something that you wanted to add? I saw you unmuted your mic.
Sorry.
You're right. I guess just kind of on the idea of like mentorship and then also like finding your community. I think something that had a huge influence on me just in grad school was at the Ecological Society of America, the Black Ecologist group. That was, I think, my second year of grad school. And just, so no one was at my institution that I met through the group, but I just met so many Black ecologists, like from undergrad all the way up to professor. And that has made such a difference. And then also, even at my institution, so I'm a part of, it's basically kind of like a Black organization at our university of all like grad students and professional students, and most of them aren't in STEM, but also that's another way that I found community amongst PhD students, because we're all going through the same thing, even if someone's in humanities, social science, etc. So that's also has helped me of like, I had to be very intentional of like finding my community and finding the folks who I can communicate and sort of like understand on a different level, and that has helped a lot through grad school. It's it's a long, lonely road, but and I would definitely echo the mentorship thing. I would say like probably my three biggest mentors were all white ladies, and they just advocated for me. And then I think another thing is that my undergrad didn't have research labs, so they didn't hold that against me, sort of thing. So they saw basically like what else I could bring to the table, even if I didn't have a ton of undergrad research lab experience for grad school. So I think just kind of like, meeting students and seeing it's more than just like the research time that you've had, and that you can bring more to the table.
Okay, so before we wrap up, any last burning thoughts that we want to leave on the table? Okay.
We are here. We are here if you need to chat more about how it is to be Black in academia, Black in parasitology, Black in science, and I'm on Twitter.
Yeah, I would say, like I said earlier, like take this as a call to action for all of our allies. Like we literally are giving you a huge list of Black microbiologists. Please use this and don't have us turn around a year from now and realize that nothing has changed.
And it's okay to say we suck at science, as in like, our science is not good. We have been trained as scientists, but so long as you say that because of the science, not because of what I look like.
And I'll just say, for all the, up and coming, the, undergrad, grad, postdoc, just keep going, keep doing what you're doing. And everyone who's involved in the Black and micro movement and other similar movements, just keep it going, because I think what you're doing is amazing. And I think that, getting us all kind of around the table, so to speak, it's just so important. So I'm just excited by it. I just want to encourage, everybody who's a part of that organization and who's, continuing it, that we should just all really support it and keep it going, because I think it's great.
Okay, so I just want to, I know I keep saying thank you, but I really do, like, even personally, hearing everything that you said has meant a lot, and especially as somebody who's really at the beginning of my career in science and microbiology. And I'm sure that there are many people who have been a part of this, either working behind the scenes, watching the videos, attending anything that they can live. Like, this has meant a lot to everybody. So I just want to say I really appreciate your time, especially the extra time. Yeah, so I hope
Watch
that.
is amazing.
Thank
Watch
you.
for life.
Yeah, so everything.